people are disgusted. I think at the beginning it was kind of like shock, like what's going on, to where now you've gone from being angry to just being absolutely disgusted with it.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Haeden Wright is president of UMWA Auxiliaries in Middle Alabama with the strike going on down there in Brookwood. She is an English teacher, I believe an English teacher, and she's the wife of a coal miner down there. So, Haeden, I appreciate your time. I know that y'all are incredibly busy, but we appreciate your time willing to talk to us.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here today with y'all.
So, the first thing, just a little bit of, I guess, personal intrigue. How, before we get into the more serious parts of the strike, how was y'all's trip to D.C.? How did you feel like y'all were received? Has there been any movement since then? Just tell us about that and what's happened since.
Well, going to D.C., I think the trip overall went really well. Senator Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders were very open, wanted to know what was going on here in Alabama. Bernie Sanders actually asked the question, why does Alabama continue to vote against its own interests? Why do they keep electing Republicans into office who are working against them? So we had some good discourse with that on why we think that does continue to happen here. And then, of course, we had the opposite side of the coin of our own representative from Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, coming into the hearing, stayed in the corner, didn't make eye contact or attempt to talk with any of us, speak to us before the hearing began, and then to take a seat and read from the Warrior Met Coal Facts page, which a lot of what he was reading had already actually been removed because it was inaccurate. Obviously, you might want to hire some people to do his research a little bit better, because we know he's not doing
his
it
Lord
on his
knows
own.
Yeah, I was about to say, we know he's not doing it on his own.
Yeah, of course not.
So, personally, I wasn't surprised by his statement. The offer that Cecil gave still stands for the rest of us. We would love to see him in Brookwood. He can come out and talk to us there, as long as he doesn't expect a warm welcome, because I don't think that's
right. Yeah, well, and I did want to correct the record just a second. I spread a little bit of misinformation on accident when I first talked about y'all's trip to D.C. It had seemed to me from the conversation on Twitter that Braxton did not shake his hand when the senator went to shake his hand as he was leaving. But when I actually went back and watched it, the full thing later, he did. And so I did want to correct that. And which even goes further to show how much kinder a man Braxton is than I am. And certainly kinder than,
because when he walked up, I told Braxton loudly, do not shake his hand. And he turned to people next to me and he was like, he just spit in all of our face. So after that, he didn't make eye contact with me at all. I guess he knew what would happen there. So
right.
Braxton is a lot nicer of a person than
certainly
I am.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, I couldn't remember when we talked about it originally if that was even the case about what he was reading from the Warrior Met press team. But it sounds like there is some some contention about the actual factual nature of those numbers. And even the number that he cited was like $97,000 a year. And even if that was true, $97,000 for 7-day weeks, 10-hour days that's not a whole lot of money. I would make more than $97,000 a year if I worked 7/10s all year. So, but did y'all see any support at all in public or personally from anyone in Alabama or any Republican across the country?
We have not. I will say after the hearing, I actually got a message on Twitter and was like, hey, I'm from Alabama and we knew that you were here and I missed you. Are you still in town? And we were like, yeah, we're down the road. We're eating. And actually it was a couple of guys that are actually there working for other senators that are from Alabama. They actually came and found us, gave us their card, and were like, we support you. We're so glad you're here. This needs to be said. People need to know that in Alabama, this is happening. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool to see that they reached out and they came out of their way to come and talk to us when they were there as staffers for other senators that couldn't attend the hearing because they had other meetings going on. But as far as in Alabama, if you're asking like if Kay Ivey's come out or anything like that, no.
Has there been any response at all? Because I have contacted personally every single federal legislator from the Alabama delegation, and as well as I believe the governor's office and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general, and all of them have either not responded or said, I don't get involved in private matters, which we know is bogus. Has there even been a response to your union or to you or to any of the members from any of these people?
No, and I think you can even see that like on Twitter. There's been several times when they've commented, I've posted back, like, hey, what about this? This is going on in your own state. Why don't you address it? And you get no response.
Right.
The big one I can think of here lately is like Katie Britt posting the pictures online of herself with the caravan that came through that are protesting and blocking roads for vaccine mandate. The sign was misspelled, that one, and she posted everywhere like she's proud of it. And I'm like, but you're literally trying to pass bills in your own state that makes those illegal. And you're not coming out and supporting workers that have been on strike for over almost a year now in your state.
Not Canada, but Tuscaloosa County.
Right. I mean, but you can't come here. You don't support workers. That's not what's happening. You're just trying to push an agenda that you think that some voters will resonate with. That's all she's doing.
Right. How is the membership taking the lack of response from Republicans in the state? I know obviously, there's a certain stereotypes are that way for a reason. And, Alabama coal miners, there are, I remember walking the picket lines with people in Trump hats, right? What would you say is the general feel among those people at these politicians, like Trump or like any other Republican elected official in the state, that have been totally silent on this?
I would say for at least our state politicians that haven't come out, people are disgusted. I think at the beginning it was kind of like shock, like what's going on, to where now you've gone from being angry to just being absolutely disgusted with it. I can tell you when Larry Spencer, which is their national vice president, pulled his phone out, because when he was campaigning, Tommy Tuberville came to UMWA and asked them to support them. They were like, of course,
wow.
We can't. Doug Jones has always stood up for us. We're going to keep. And he was like, well, that's okay. I'm always here to support you. This is my personal cell phone number. If you need anything, call me. This has been my number for 10 years. You just have to call me. Guess what number's been disconnected?
Wow.
Guess who hasn't received any response to the letter that he actually wrote asking why he said those things, why he hasn't come out to support workers. So I can tell you at the rally, there was a lot of chance of vote him out and some other expletives on where he could go.
Yeah. Well, and I could imagine I remember Larry Spencer putting that letter out, and he did not he didn't mince words in that, and it was pretty good. I'm seeing if I can find that, but in his letter from AL.com article about it, Spencer said Tuberville's comments reflected only the company's stance regarding the strike, which really struck me because immediately before he gave the company line on the strike, he said that we shouldn't weigh in at all, and then basically like, oh, Well, I mean, if I'm going to weigh in, of course it's going to be for the boss. I mean, come on.
Well, what got me, my favorite part was when he said, well, if we were going to have this hearing, it should have been a part of the committee that I'm on. Okay, so
right.
so
do
it.
Yeah.
Heard on, why aren't we up here when you're on that committee? I mean, it made you look like a bumbling idiot. Like we know he is, but I was like, okay, so you're openly admitting that, okay, we should have heard this at my committee, but I don't really care about it because I don't support workers, so we're not going to hear it there. But shame on you for giving workers a voice.
Right.
And just so everyone knows, I did put a link to the PayPal for the UMWA Strike Pantry in the Facebook and YouTube comments. So if you've never donated before or it's been a while since you've contributed, please see if you can spare a few bucks to support these folks. They have been on strike since April 1st, correct?
Yes.
So that is a long time to be on strike, and it's really, it's been inspiring to see a lot of folks from across the labor movement, even across the world, chip in and express solidarity to try to support the mine strike and the families that are involved. But if you can find it in your heart and in your wallet to give just whatever you can,
right.
I know that would be really appreciated.
So what about negotiations? How has there been any update at all since the hearing from the company?
Yes, I believe we were actually meeting this week. There had been some movement, not to where there's a tentative agreement or anything yet. But there had been some movement. About a month ago, you had the head of BlackRock put out that statement that companies should support their workers and all of that. Of course, words are empty unless you actually take actions to make sure that's happening. That's one thing we were in D.C. for, is actually talking about how private equity groups like BlackRock, Apollo, Vanguard, they come in and they swoop up companies that file for bankruptcy that they know are actually profitable. And then they bleed them dry. They exploit families, they exploit the workers, and they exploit the communities. And so that's what we see happening here. So those company statements that come out, they're only trying to protect their capital interests, their investments. Unless you're actually going to be willing to say that we're going to take some responsibility for this and we're going to force these people that we hold massive shares in to come to the table and treat workers fairly, I really don't care about your empty words that you put out in a letter.
Right. Well, how is the membership doing? Almost a year on strike. How's everybody holding up? How's the morale and everything?
I think the morale is pretty high right now. Being on strike's hard. Any time you go on strike, it's hard, especially when you've been on strike a year. And you have to think a lot of our membership are younger people with families. So a lot have had to take on, part-time jobs. Women that previously didn't work have had to go back into the workforce. So it's been a big shift for families just in your daily living structure, because when you're used to having a spouse that's gone 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, to try to shift back and kind of reform your family structure while on strike, just that is difficult. But then we're actually luckier than most would be. I mean, the UMWA has increased strike pay as the strike has progressed. It's $800 every 2 weeks, which still $16 a month. That's a huge help. The donation checks that people sent to International, that's a huge help. But we have to remember that some workers, that's their whole income for the month. So while we are struggling and it is hard, this is a struggle that a lot of people have dealt with forever. And I think that that's eye-opening to see how hard it is to survive on that amount. I think that's also something that's kind of shifted people's perspective on things like increasing the minimum wage, on really helping to organize in other places, because you can't support a family on that, not and live an actual life. You have no livelihood. So I think that's been eye-opening too. For my own family, I know there's been times you just have to decide which bills are going to get paid and which ones aren't that month. And you don't have extra stuff. So like when you're, like for us, our heat went out back in December, January. You don't just have the money to replace that. So you use firewood in your fireplace. And when my husband had to work, I took the kids and we went and stayed with my parents because it was cold. And that's just what you have to do, because crossing a picket line is not an option. I mean, that's what the company wants. They've said that in negotiations, that they want to starve us out. They could afford to pay us what we're asking for. They could afford to do it. They just don't want to. So.
Right. Of course. And you know, the conservative response to this that I hear all the time is like, well, why don't you just get a different job, or why don't you cross the picket line? I was talking to somebody whose parent had scabbed before, and she said, well, he had kids to feed. And it's like, well, why do you think people went on strike in the first place? You know, what do you say? I'm sure that, especially now having been on strike a year, that there are people in your life that have asked you, you know, why don't y'all just get a different job and just leave the company, or why don't you cross the picket line? What do you say to them?
Why would you give up things that people fought and for mine workers died for? Think about Blair Mountain. Think about Mab One. Think about all of these people that fought to have these safety measures in place for you, that fought for you to have a living wage, that fought for things to be like they are now, that people just take advantage of, that they think that that's just a guarantee. It's disrespectful to history. It's disrespectful for all those people that fought. UMWA was one of the first integrated unions. Before segregation, before all that, they were like, no, we're all the same. We're all equal. We're all union brothers and sisters. That's what a union does. So I'm going to fight for that all workers are valuable. And besides your political lines, besides your ethnicity, besides your race, your sexuality, a union gives you the protection and it makes you a family. Those things don't matter anymore. And that has been a beautiful thing about the strike, is seeing people that do have such different political ideologies, such different backgrounds, coming together and fighting for a common purpose. And that makes some people afraid, because if you can put all those things aside and you can fight for what's good for everyone, what else could you change besides a contract?
Right.
Right.
Amen.
So the last thing that Adam, were you about to say something?
No, I just was saying amen back here.
Yeah. Well,
preach it, sister.
The last thing that I wanted to ask you about is the mine workers' support for the Amazon Union campaign. Folks that regularly tune into the channel will know that Braxton voted yes live on the DSA for UMWA fundraising live stream here on the Valley Labor Report's YouTube channel. That was very cool. So, you know, some of the people that are on strike at the mine have gotten a part-time job at Amazon. What has that been like, being a part of the two most important labor struggles, certainly in Alabama in modern history, and potentially in the United States at the same time? What is that like?
I think at this point, for a lot of us, it's just become so much a part of our life that you just expect, you don't understand why other people aren't doing that. Like, why weren't you at the rally is more like how we're looking at it from our side. Like, why would you not want to support workers who are trying to form a union? And I love to see, we had like 50 something people there at the rally, you know, last Saturday for RWDSU. And we're changing.
From the mine workers?
Yes, we had. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Ron Sanson, which is the International Financial Secretary, he spoke, Larry Spencer spoke, and Braxton spoke at the rally. And what we wanted them to see is like, hey, we've been on strike for 11 months and we're still fighting. Mm-hmm. But with solidarity within the labor movement, even though we've been fighting 11 months, we still have the strength to come and fight for you all too. That just because we're fighting, we're still going to support you in your struggle. And that's what mutual aid is. That's what the whole labor movement should be about, is that we all come together and we support each other. And when you see that happen, it's a beautiful thing. And I would love to see some more organizing going on in Alabama. If other people want to organize, we'll be there to stand up for them too.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward and hopeful for an explosion of just that here in the state and across the South and across the country. Haeden, thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you put in for the people of Alabama. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.